Hello and welcome to Speedgig. We're here with Adam Holzman, currently touring Europe together with Steve Wilson. Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So, your father was the founder of Electro Records.
That's right.
Was it clear for you at a young age to become a musician, or have you ever had thoughts about another career?
No, I wanted to be a musician from an early age. My father was always working with musicians, and it always looked like it was much more fun to be doing what the musicians were doing. So
yeah.
I started playing when I was around 9 years old, and I, of course, grew up around a lot of great artists that were signed to Elektra, and that was a big influence on me when I was growing up.
Oh, that sounds nice. So you said one of your main influences was the band The Doors.
That's right.
And one of your very
when I was young.
Sure. And one of your very first jobs was working on Camino Burana.
Well, the story is that how do I start? I knew Ray Manzarek for a very long time. He was a friend of the family. And when I started getting older, I went more into a sort of jazz and jazz rock fusion kind of style. And I had my own group in California called The Fence, spelled F-E-N-T-S, The Fence. And we toured a lot around California. As a matter of fact, we opened up a lot for Alan Holdsworth when Chad started playing with Alan Holdsworth, so that was interesting. But so I had this sort of an established jazz rock group, and Ray would come and see us, and he liked the band very much. And I guess he thought that we would be good for this project, so he used the whole band on the Camino Burana record. And it's not exactly a very well-known record, but it did come out kind of cool. Philip Glass produced it, and I do have an appreciation now for the piece Camino Burana, but I love working with Ray. I mean, Ray was my hero, and a chance to work with him was really great. So
yeah,
so that was great.
Yeah. So by the time Miles Davis recognized you, I read that you were working at a music store. Is that true?
Well, kind of. I was working at a music store, and I started getting some. Well, let me back up. I was working in the music store around 1984, which was a very interesting time, because at this moment is when synthesizers actually started to sound really good.
Yeah.
And we used to sell we used to sell all the top stuff. So we were selling the emulators, PPG Wave, Oberheim systems, all these fantastic synthesizers that people now would die to have now,
Yeah.
And so being at the music store, I had to learn how to program and use a lot of these different keyboards, so I was sort of at the cutting edge of the technology. And I could play as well. So people would come into the store and I would demonstrate the equipment, but they could also see that I could play. And I got hired to do recording sessions. And one of the people that hired me was Randy Hall, who was an R&B artist. He was signed to MCA, and he also had worked with Miles several times before. He's the guy that sang that song, The Man with the Horn, on the album The Man with the Horn. And he also had a song, Shout. So him and Vince Wilburn and some of his crowd from Chicago worked with Miles in the very early 80s. And then Miles was interested, around the time of Tutu, Miles was interested again in working with Randy, because he wanted to do something a little bit more R&B, like Prince or popish commercial style, because he had some good success from Human Nature and Time After Time.
Yeah.
So he hired Randy, and I was already working with Randy on his project for that summer, programming synthesizers and playing and stuff like that. So he hired me as well. I mean, on Randy's recommendation, so I had a chance to work with Miles. First time I worked with him was in the studio, and we recorded a couple tracks, and then Miles liked the idea of having, with the synthesizers, he could have a big sound of a big group with a small band. Because again, we're at the point now where things like Oberheim and stuff like that, you can have a really nice string sound, brass sound, very convincing, and even if it doesn't sound exactly like the original instruments, it's still a cool sound. Yeah. It's a big sound. And So that's kind of how it happened. I was doing other sessions and through the music store, and one of those sessions led me to Miles.
Nice.
So long story short.
And you were also hired for the tour?
Well, as soon as, like I said, as soon as we did the session, Miles was just about to leave for Europe in 3 days, and he said, "I want you to come to Europe with me." So I basically dropped everything in California and flew back to New York with him and went to Europe and did a 3-week tour with him. So within like 24 hours of meeting him, I was on tour with him.
Wow,
practically on tour with the band. It was an
sounds like
absolutely amazing time. Yeah, it was like, for a musician, it was a complete dream, absolutely.
And to continue your dream, you even became the band leader 4 years after you joined the band. So, like
but
the
at the time,
director.
when Robert Irving left the band, which was sometime around, I guess it was early '88. Miles needed someone to explain his ideas to. I mean, it wasn't really, he called it musical director, but basically it was someone that would write down Miles's ideas and then go show them to the band.
Okay.
And and then Miles would come and change everything around later anyway. But it would be, he'd get the ball rolling, and I could write music out for him and stuff. So when Robert Irving left the band in the fall, I guess it was fall of '88, then I sort of stepped in and started doing the same job he did. So yeah, for the last year that I was there, I was a musical director.
Cool. And was it also your job to hire and fire musicians?
No.
Okay.
No. Miles handpicked all his musicians.
Oh, cool.
There was no, I mean, you could recommend people and he would check it out. He would listen to headphone, whatever, he'd check it out. There was no YouTube, of course, but
sure.
It was always him. He never. That was the one thing about all his bands, all the musicians, always handpicked by him.
Yeah. And you also have a successful band, your own band, Brave New World. The band has existed for about 20 years now. Off and
on, different combinations of people, but we've been traveling back and forth to Europe since, yeah, the mid-90s, so almost 20 years. Yeah, it's a long time, but we don't, you know, unfortunately, the music business being what it is, we get over to Europe about every 2 years. And do some touring, usually around Germany, because my booking agent is based in Germany.
Okay.
So I would like to do more with the group, but in the last 2 years, most of my time has been taken with Stephen Wilson.
Okay. And can you tell us how the jazz rock scene the past 20 years has changed?
Well, that's a really complicated question. Well, a couple things. When jazz rock first became popular, and you've got to go back even more than 20 years, talking about the early '70s,
yeah.
It was, some of the bands were playing places that were almost as big as the rock bands were playing. You know, a group like Weather Report would go and do what was it, we went to see them, it wasn't, yeah, the Anaheim Convention Center. I mean, almost rock-size arenas that jazz rock bands would play. Mahavishnu played big places, if not arenas, then really big theaters, you know, at least 6,000. And this was very successful time. And so that was when I was a teenager, and that was what I thought, this was really cool, this is what I want to do. There's a big success here. And then by the time I finally was able to play a little bit and I had a good band, the jazz rock scene was not so popular. What had taken over was this smooth jazz, radio-friendly style, very watered down. They called it jazz fusion, but it really wasn't jazz fusion. It was basically instrumental pop. And that basically took control of the market for contemporary jazz. I mean, because jazz rock is part of contemporary jazz. That took control of the market for a long time. In many ways, the original, I feel that the original moment of jazz rock in the early '70s is really the last step so far that has been in jazz, because then jazz rock became commercialized and became smooth jazz, and at the same time the retro movement came in, you know, led by Wynton Marsalis, where all the music went back to an older styles. And at that point, sometime in the early mid-'80s, after Miles, mid to late '80s, the main mainstream of jazz was dominated by music that had actually been played in the 1950s.
Yeah.
So for the first time, the mainstream of jazz is not playing cutting-edge music, but it's playing an old-fashioned style. And the thing is, this is something that the record companies felt they could control and capitalize on. They started signing 12-year-old jazz musicians, and the younger the better, and Young Lions, and all this stuff. And that movement sort of died out as well. And in the process, it seemed to kill a lot of the creative momentum of real jazz rock. So, like I said, it's a complicated question. I mean, right now, the most creative music is on the sidelines, and without a central figure like Miles in jazz, there's very little focus in the jazz world,
yeah.
And they're all just limping along, playing variations of styles that have existed for 20 years. So I think right now we're a little bit at a standstill, to tell you the truth. And maybe I think the new direction might be things like what Stephen Wilson's doing, because he's combining some of the excitement of jazz rock and jazz fusion with visuals and a more song and structured approach, and that might be what the next step is.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. And one of your quotes is, "Instrumental music or jazz rock, it's got to be live for it to have the cutting edge." So
that was something I said a long time ago.
Okay.
But my feeling was that my group is one of the, it seems like it's one of the last groups that goes into the studio all at once and records all at the same time. You know, maybe you do a little fix or two here and there, but it's and when I said that, a lot of groups weren't doing that.
Okay.
So that's why I said it's got to be live. But my webmaster put that quote on there, and I'm not particularly. That's not for me anything particularly profound, but anyway, yeah. I think a combination of studio production and live is fine, you know.
Okay.
It just depends on the project.
And do you think that digital downloads and illegal downloads, do they affect album sales of jazz rock scene? Like they affect the popular mainstream music?
Not quite as much, because it tends to be a slightly older audience. We're talking about an audience that's still used to buying CDs, so a lot of the people that listen to the music that I create are likely to go to Amazon or at least iTunes to buy their music. We're not talking about 1 million people downloading a Britney Spears tune. So it's kind of a different thing. Also, I think that a little bit like what Stephen's doing is, if you put together a creative package where the music is presented as art and not as software, then people will want to buy it. So if you have a nice booklet and a nice digipack and a good artwork and maybe even extras and 5.1 mix and things like that, then you've created something that you just can't steal and you just can't download.
Yeah.
And if you're a fan of the music, you'll want to have that. And I think that's a very smart approach. Otherwise, once you put your music out on the internet, I mean, it's gone. I mean, it hurts everybody, and in some ways it hurts the small artists more, because maybe I'm not a victim so much of that much digital downloading, but if 100 people did illegally download my record instead of buying it, which is nothing for Britney Spears, or not even Britney Spears, Miley's, whatever her name is, Miley Cyrus or whoever. But for me, 100 CDs, hey, that's actually, you know, could be almost $1,000, you know, and that directly affects my livelihood and my ability to continue to make creative music. So yes, I think it does have an effect, and it's not. I mean, people should want to pay, man. It's not fair. It's a new mentality that music is expected to be free, and it's hard to go against that. And there's a generation now that's been brought up basically, you know, believing that that's accepted as the norm, and it's really hard to make people pay for something that they consider should be free. So it gets into some really, really tricky areas, you know, all kinds of social stuff and economics, and I don't know what the solution is.
Still have to figure it out.
Yeah, we're still figuring. The music business the music business is in a massive state of transition.
Yeah.
And it's been happening for, well, since the CD started going out. I mean, I think one of the most positive trends is the resurgence of vinyl. Vinyl is back up to like 5% of the market or something like that. I mean, and that's something that you can't digitally download. You know, the vinyl experience. I mean, there goes back to what I was saying before. The music becomes a beautiful object. You know, it sounds, you know, warm and friendly when you put it on the turntable. So I think that's a very positive trend. You know, so there's some things. I mean, there's some things that you can point to which might be the way. Also, I think you take the vinyl trend and you take it up to a larger scale to the retailers. And of course, Tower Records went down a few years ago, and some of these big retailers, like even FNAC and Saturn, used to have enormous CD sections. Now they're smaller and smaller, and the jazz section is this small. Yeah. But there's many more independent record shops now and vinyl stores selling used vinyl, new vinyl, used CDs, some new stuff. And these guys are thriving because they're specializing and they're giving a good price, and people are starting to go. So that's another positive trend. That's tied with the vinyl trend. I spoke to someone at a vinyl record store in New York a few months ago, and he said 3 years ago he could have never seen this vinyl explosion happening.
Okay.
And it's really just, you know, accelerated.
Yeah. Nice. And one last question. Your wife is guitarist?
Yes, Jane Getter, yeah.
Yeah. And you're also playing in a band with her?
Right. She's got a very good group. As a matter of fact, we're playing in California. We're playing at the Baked Potato in January, and Chad Reckwood's going to be playing drums with us too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, she's got a great record out. Just came out a few months ago called 3, spelled out 3, and Anton Fig is playing drums, James Genus on bass, play keyboards, Jane playing guitars, a little bit more rock fusion, and she has some vocal stuff on there. It's a very good record.
Nice. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, man. Good questions. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay.